Welcome to our experiment, the 100-Person Project, and I am Bill Carell, and this is my investigation. Simple questions for 100 people. This is a research project to gather data from 100 beautiful human beings for the sole purpose to see what actually happens across the interviews. Now, the questions are fixed and all the interviews will remain consistent, with the variable being the actual participants themselves, these beautiful ladies and gentlemen. It's as if I'm having you, Jan, come sit on my porch to share your ideas so I can learn about people. Although that's me and some of my friends who came up with this idea, we're not really sure what we're going to discover, if anything. But when we're complete, we're really interested in the people, the process, and in your particular story. So, you know what? Why don't we just go ahead and dive in? And what is your full name?
Jan Carol Jeremias.
Nice. And what's your favorite nickname that most people don't know?
Only have 3 people in my life who call me this, and that is Janny.
Annie, very nice. And who are those 3 people, if you don't mind?
My father calls me Janny, and then I have 2 close friends that call me Janny, and no one else ever picked it up.
That's interesting. How does it make you feel when they call you Janny?
Like I'm a kid again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what's that feel like?
Oh, fun. I've known these 2 women my entire life. So I think it brings me back to simpler times, like probably more carefree times when life wasn't so intense or whatever. So yeah.
Awesome. Simpler times when life wasn't so intense. So Jan, I'm not going to call you Janny. We don't know each other that well yet, but we're getting there.
We're getting there.
When did you first notice what color hair you had?
I think it was about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think because it was really interesting. My mother had long hair. And then when she had my brother, who was older, she cut her hair short and she saved her hair, and she still has it actually in a bag. And I remember her taking it out and my hair color being the exact same or very similar, and thinking to myself, oh, that's the color hair I have. Like I have like that sort of blondish brown hair.
That's a really vivid memory. Good for you. And does the question take you back?
Yeah, like I remember where she used to keep it in her dresser. And I remember looking at it because I think that, I only knew my mother with short hair. So I think I used to try to envision what she looked like with long hair and, so yeah, it does take me back.
So what is your favorite thing to do to intentionally waste time?
Probably binge watch movies.
Got any
or TV shows?
Sure.
Yeah.
What's your favorite recent binge?
Oh, what's my favorite? I love All Creatures Great and Small. That's I think it's on PBS, the newest version.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way they speak. I love how they're filming time, like the era that it's filmed in. So I'm really enjoying it. It's also about animals. So I work with animals. So, so it can't get much better than that for me.
100%. And I have to tell you, my recollection of that particular show goes back to the 1970s, maybe. Yeah. When my kids were not here yet. And my wife and I used to watch that together.
Yeah. And so this newest version is kind of fun.
Good. So that's a great show to binge. I'm just putting my 2 cents in.
Oh, thank you.
So what is your favorite movie to watch alone?
Goodness. Favorite movie to watch alone. Well, if I was to go, I think because we just came off of the holiday season,
right,
for me, and I think one of my favorite movies, whether to watch alone or with others, is It's a Wonderful Life. I love that movie. And So I think that I could watch it in, any time, but since I actually just watched it pretty recently, I was like, oh, I love this movie.
Yeah, it's not going to be a surprise to you. That's been reported by a couple of people. And
Oh,
usually it's because it's when they're the most upset and crying wildly. They prefer not for other people to not necessarily see them. And is that why it's a good one for you to watch alone?
I don't know. I think I like the idea, and yeah, and I just think it's a beautiful movie. It's, I think we all go through that kind of aspect where we question what's happened in our life and who we've become, and you know, and to be able to, in a way, to be able to see like that he was able to see what life would have been like without him.
Yeah.
It was kind
It's
of
a,
special.
it's a huge gift, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would that we all could stand in that place at least once in our lives.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes we can intentionally do that. We can like envision, like, when things get hard, you can say to yourself, oh, okay, well, if I hadn't been here, this wouldn't have happened, or I wouldn't have been able to help this person. Um, you know,
Yeah.
so that kind of thing kind of makes you reflect, step back and say, okay, things are okay,
Yeah.
or better than okay.
Yeah. There's work we got to do around here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there
We're
is.
counting on us, whether we know it or not.
Right.
What a
Exactly.
lovely way to view life.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So if you were to have an action figure made of you, Jan, what superpower would it have, and what colors would its uniform be?
Wisdom or intuition. And the colors would be purple and orange.
Purple and orange.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what's up with that?
Um, I don't know why purple and orange. I mean, I'm a yoga teacher and I know the colors of the chakras, so I don't know if it has anything significance with that. But intuition and wisdom, I just think as we get colored by outside circumstances and everything, I think we lose touch with that sort of gut instinct of kind of that knowing of, oh, that feels right.
Yeah.
Or that is right. And, especially when it's not mainstream, it becomes very hard to kind of get in touch with that and stand true to it, I think, to really stick to it. And so I think I look at that as being like, if I could grant that to other people, to actually get back in touch with that kind of intuition or kind of gut instinct, would be really, to me, like a gift to people.
I suspect that you've experienced this once or twice in your life.
Only once or twice. I tend to be a black sheep, so I've had to I've stepped out of the box in a number of areas in my life.
Yeah.
So I think that, just knowing that in your gut, it just says, this just isn't right for me.
Yeah.
And, sometimes not an easy place to be.
Well, that sounds like it would be a very, very most excellent action figure.
Oh, thank you.
So, what did you want to be when you grew up and you were 5 years old?
I wanted to be a veterinarian.
A veterinarian.
Yeah. Loved animals, always loved animals. My mother used to say that I would go up to anything. Like, she used to reprimand me all the time because I would go up to dogs, and she used to say, you just can't go up to every strange dog,
Sure.
but I was kind of like, had the fearlessness of a kid sometimes.
Yeah.
At that, especially with that. And I was totally intrigued with animals. I remember calling my mother when I was like 10 years old. I went to this game farm and they had, it was either like a tiger or a lion, and the woman was in the cage with it. It was full grown. And I remember sitting there, I didn't really want to move. And years later, I was in college and they had something on the news or something about some lion or tiger that was up for adoption. And I called my mother jokingly. And she said to me, Jan, you're not getting it. But like, I mean, obviously I never had wild animals, but I thought they were just beautiful.
Yeah. So at 5, had you had prior exposure to a vet, or what do you think it was that made that come into your mind?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I didn't know it was called, I think I did know it was called a veterinarian. I think that I loved animals and I wanted to help them and work with them. So to me, that was what I was envisioning to be. Maybe it was a little later that I realized that that's what it was called, but I knew that that's the work I wanted to do.
Something to do with animals and something to do with keeping them well, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Yeah,
Yeah.
terrific. So what is your greatest accomplishment?
Um, I think my greatest accomplishment, I mean, I could think of different things that I've done, like, I'm the author of books, like, and that's an accomplishment. But I think my greatest accomplishment was about 20 something years ago. I had the end of a relationship and being able to make it on my own, um, you know, so to speak, in a career I love, like in work that I loved, I was just, I think that I look at that as, probably my greatest accomplishment.
I can actually see it in your face while you're talking about it. Even though it's a very general description, there's a lot of communication coming from, from your face. So who is your favorite person to listen to?
David White, the poet David White. Love his accent. I'm a huge poetry person, love poetry. And I just love listening to his voice. I mean, it's just beautiful. And I've done a number of workshops with him, online workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And when he reads and I've also I saw him once in person. And to hear him read his own poetry was just phenomenal.
That's great. Is there something that sticks out in particular that really moved you and touched you the first time that you can recall, or something you've heard along the way that you'd like to share with the folks that are listening?
Well, I remember the first book I got that he wrote was called The House of Belonging. And I love that book. And when I went to meet him, and when I went to see him, I bought a book, and I bought that book so that he could autograph it.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me. And he looked at the book and the cover was falling off, literally.
Yeah.
And he just went, oh. It was kind of like he knew that I had read those poems over and over and over again. And it was such a wonderful memory, of, it was also this feeling of I think when we read an author, we have this image of who they are, and when he was up on stage and his honesty and his just all his personalities and all the different things that you could feel who he was. And it was actually in a lot of ways quite different than his poems. And I understood his poetry from a different place than I had just reading it from a book.
Yeah.
Which is very different to me.
Yeah, it changes everything, having other senses involved, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was just, he was so human, and where it looked like he was so put together, but then you realize that his poetry is just an evolution of getting to that place. And that's why I think that I thought it was in so many ways such a different experience than just picking up a book and saying, okay, well, assuming that someone because you've read their writing.
Yeah. And isn't that what we all do? We read a book and now we know who the author is.
That's right. Or we see a painting and we can feel like we know the artist, or something. And we really don't. I mean, we know one aspect of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good poetry is a mirror, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
So would you please complete this sentence? When I grow up, I'd like to
own a farm.
You would.
Yeah, I have friends who joke with me. I'm a morning person. I have friends who always tell me I should have been a farmer because I'm up with but there's something about just living near the earth and being reliant on the earth that I find very attractive, or very just like, and almost in some ways healing. I think, I don't know, something about making something that other people could benefit from. So whether, however that be, whether it be, you know, fruits and vegetables. And I'm not a gardener by any means, but there's something about being able to share with other people, almost to the extent where we're just like a commune type thing, where we
Sure.
just everybody work together and, you know, and sustain each other and take care of each other.
It's a beautiful idea. I wonder if anybody else has ever thought of that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Especially these days. I think people have, live in a world that people kind of, I don't know, especially with COVID, I think people in some ways have disconnected from each other. And then now I'm hoping that people are reconnecting a little bit better.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. And it does seem like we have lost a little bit of our personal contact, touch, and miss it,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why, I think it's so attractive to me. Like, could we bring that back?
Hmm. So that's a great lead into the next question. Jan, what is the most important thing in life to you right now?
Health.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Health. I'm going through some personal health things, but I think that, and when health is in many forms. I mean, you could say physical health, but I think health comes in many aspects, whether that be emotional health, just, which I think that everybody could use right now, because I think people are far too stressed and very anxious, understandably so. And I think physical health, just because um, I think we need baseline good health to be able to go through the world. I think, just we need to eat well, get enough sleep and water, like all the basics. So health would probably be my.
It sounds like a good one. Now, what would you like to leave in the world after your life is done?
So through the years, especially during COVID, um, I've read poetry for probably 20 years and written, on and off for 20, being a yoga teacher as one of my professions. And so I have probably pages and pages of essays and now recent poetry. And so I'd like to write a book
Mm-hmm.
to leave to people of inspirations, of poetry, things to help them um, sort of hopefully manage or get some support. That's, I think, I've written a number of books, but that would be very different for me. So, yeah, so that's what I think I'd like to leave.
Kind of goes back to your superpower, doesn't it?
Yeah, wisdom.
Yeah, and making a difference with other people so that they're free.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it does. I've really, like, through the past 3 years anyway, I know that, I'd never written a poem in my life, and sat down and I was just playing around, and it's like the inspiration came. And sometimes, like I can just tell by being who you are, um, just this creative individual, like every now and then someone says a phrase and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's it. Like that's the exact words I was looking for. Or that's the exact thought I was having, but I couldn't express it properly.
Yeah, it's kind of neat when our thought comes out of somebody else's mouth for the first time.
Yeah, yeah, I had that happen the other day with one of my students who came to class, and I told her that's now the title of my book, is now going to be that. She's a lovely woman, and she sat down in my yoga class, and it was Zoomed. And so I guess there was this slight pause of like where the video didn't kick in. And then her video appeared and she said, oh my gosh, here I am. So that's the title. It's like, oh, here I am. This is going to be the title of the book,
That's
because
marvelous.
Yeah, it was just this great expression on her face with this full smile of like a baby seeing its face in the mirror for the first time. It's like I was gone and now here I am.
Yes. Boy, that's very powerful. Uh, it just touches me to have people in this day and age actually see the uniqueness and the specialness in themselves in a moment and be able to actually experience that,
Yeah, I think that I then ended up writing like a section on it, on that phrase. And I was thinking about it as just this recognition of being so in touch with who you are in that precise moment when, is such a gift. And so, as much as we can share that with people, like, it doesn't matter the age. Like, I think that it has to start from the youth, actually, from little kids. Like, they have to realize how special they are.
Mm. Wow, that's very, very important what you just said, in my particular opinion, because the children are they're the guardians of the future, in my opinion. And if we give them something to stand on, that they don't have to get their value from outside of themselves, I think that's something, it's a gift that lasts a lifetime.
Yeah, so agree, especially in a time where I think they get their um, value of themselves so much outside of themselves, like, from peers, from social media, from whatever, all these different things. And I think it's, and that's where they lay value. It's like in that comparison.
Hmm.
And we all know that, comparing yourself to others does not does not work, to say the least.
Well, that would be another whole podcast that you and I could
Right,
do together. And I
exactly.
will invite you to be on my other podcast, because we have much to discuss.
Okay.
But that being said, we've actually gotten to the last of my scripted questions for you. And this is what, you go to a baker and, you buy a dozen rolls, and what do most good bakers do? They put a 13th one in for free,
Of
right?
course, of course.
So the baker's question: what is the thing that most people misunderstand about you, Jan?
Well, I think people who know me, like, and know my background, um, I was a clinical research scientist for 24 years. I am very much the scientist in the way I think. And so they think I'm very science geeky and kind of have a hardness about me.
Hmm.
And I'm a mush. I am. I tend to wear my emotions on my sleeve. I can probably cry at the drop of a hat,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, like, I think they would say I'm a mush, like, and I'm not at all how how people might think I am.
It sounds like the antithesis of the, shall we say, the hermetically sealed scientific mind,
Yeah, exactly.
untouched and unwashed by any degree of whatever it is, it's all the science, right? Straight down the middle of the road, right? And
Yeah, I
that's
think
not you anymore, is it?
no, it's not. I mean, I have a friend who once turned to me and said, you're this weird combination of science geek with a lot of woo woo. Like, and so I think that's who I've become. I've become this, yeah, I have that scientific kind of, and when people ask me a question, I
Mhm.
think that don't necessarily think about that first, but I'm sure it must formulate part of what I'm going to tell them. But I think there is a lot of what I want to call as insight and wisdom that now comes in,
Yeah.
which is not scientific at all, which is much more like, you know, how do you feel or what's your gut telling you to do, as opposed to the scientific data.
Sure. And it almost sounds to me like there might be a scientific process in terms of having a really nice relationship with the world,
Hmm.
where there are steps that you're automatically going to do because you've forgotten even why you do the things that you do in the order that you do them. But sometimes there's an order to it, isn't there?
Yes, sometimes there is.
Yes.
Sometimes there is an order.
Good. So any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
Um, no, I thought this was really fun.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see what you find out or read what you find out.
Yeah.
Um, I'm reminded of, all the sort of personality tests and type things I've ever done,
Yep.
where we all are this mosaic of different qualities and different traits, and just each person brings a uniqueness to the world.
Yes. Yeah, there's I think it's a Taoist saying that says we are not a drop in the ocean, we are the ocean in a drop.
Yes,
So
love that phrase.
it's all here. And I heard somebody else say it a little bit differently back in the 1990s, when holograms were a big deal. And,
Mhm.
they were readily available and people could have pictures of themselves done in this kind of 3D thing but the neat part of it is if you break off a piece of a hologram, the little individual piece looks exactly like the big piece. It's all there 100%. Very
Wow,
interesting. Yeah.
that is very interesting.
Yeah. So, do you have any questions of me before we wrap up?
No, I'm good.
You are okay. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you supporting my effort here in the scientific approach that I'm taking. To do a sociology experiment with 100 different people, and I'm really kind of, the hypothesis here is that although it's kind of common for people to talk about groups and this and that and whatever, I have a feeling that we're going to find out that at the core, there's a lot about us that's very unique individually and very much the same in the human condition. So I don't know how that's going to go, but we have to start with some sort of a hypothesis, right?
Yes. And I think that that's what, in conversation that I have with people or that where I met you, and you realize that basically there were quite a lot of people that shared very similar experiences
Yeah.
In a group of people that had really didn't know each other before or don't didn't grow up together kind of thing. And just those experiences are quite similar. And even people and what they did with those experiences was quite similar. So it was very interesting to me.
It's a remarkable thing, isn't it? I mean, how often do we take the time to really kind of query and look into what is it to be a human being, you know, as opposed to we're just going through our lives doing the next thing on the schedule, meeting with the next person we promised to talk to.
Right, exactly.
Well, with that said, I just want to thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up our simple questions for 100 people today, and thank you so much, Jan. It's really been a pleasure, to interview you today, and I feel like I've gotten to get to know you a little bit more, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bill, for having me.
You've got it, and I will see you again very soon.
You've been listening to Simple Questions for 100 People, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.